Iranian. He was the head of the Iranian Jewish community, and he was executed for having link with the state, with the Zionist state. That was described, and they said he's been spying for them for decades. Next, these are the leaders of some of the leaders of the Baha'i community. And for some of you might know, Baha'i faith is, again, a kind of branch of Islam, and a modern version, if you like, a modern version of Islam, which allows women full participation. And hence, the fundamentalists are against it. And what they did was they basically killed a lot of their leaders, and to this day they are killing Baha'is, and many of them escaped to different countries, including Israel. No, I think we move on. No, I think that would be too. Yeah. Okay. Stop. And then move. No, this button there. Yeah. Okay, good. This is in the Kurdish regions of Iran, because the Kurds put resistance against the central government, and again, Mr. Khalkhali, the executioner guy that I told you about, he went and basically he killed a lot of Kurdish fighters. This is the beginning of the fights of the women's movement, if you like. The women's movement didn't start last month or the month before. It started on week 1, week 2 of the Islamic Revolution, because one of the demand was, under Shia rule, women have to be covered. And if they're not covered, then something would happen to them. And they started throwing acids in the street at women which were not covered. And that became quite a common practice till they actually passed a law in the parliament, and they disallowed women being allowed, not being allowed to, they have to cover their face. Then came crisis after crisis, and this is, many of you might remember American hostages. Twice the embassy was ransacked, twice. First time was by the leftists, the second time by the Islamic fundamentalists, so-called Islamic students. And as you know, they were in captivity for 444 days. And one of the, for me, still maybe ironic thing is that in the first attempt to ransack the embassy, in fact, the guy who came and intervened and took the leftists to one side and said, "You're naughty boys, you shouldn't be here," was a butcher, a very famous butcher who had machete, and he came and he basically acted as the agent of the law to take them out. And that shows the chaos that was at that time and the chaos that still continues to this day. And the American hostage taking, again, was one of the first ever incidents that we've seen in history that embassy of another country was in fact taken. And I think from that moment onwards, to some extent, US lost its credibility in terms of being able to cope with a lot of attacks that took place at a later time. The entire Iranian intellectual business leaders were killed, escaped or silenced. Musicians, film directors, film actors, nightclubs, bars, alcohol ban, and many of these artists were again killed, escaped, or imprisoned. And millions fled Iran. Iran was a very stable country. It was an extremely stable country. And once these things happened, millions left Iran, and the estimate today is something around 8 million living outside Iran. And they are scattered in 150 countries. They're not just in one place. I think the majority of them are in United States, but they are in every country that they allow them to go in, basically. And the exodus has not stopped. In fact, it has increased. You know, you would have thought after 44 years, there would be some stability, but there is not any of that. And in fact, if the borders were open and people could get out, I think there won't be anybody left except the fundamentalists. Right from first month, they started state terrorism. They started killing dissidents, not only inside, but outside Iran. In fact, the first one was an attaché in New York. Then they started killing lots of politicians in Europe, including United Kingdom. This gentleman, 36 years old, when he was shot dead in Paris by some unknown Islamic group. You know, you can always invent a good name. And he was a relative of the Shah. In fact, he was the son of the sister, the twin sister of the Shah, named Shafir, and he was shot dead in Paris. This man name is Sadeh Qutbzadeh. He came in the same plane from Paris with Khomeini. He came and he was his assistant. In fact, in the aeroplane, he's sitting on the seat next to Mr. Khomeini. And he was based in Paris. And he led a federation called the Iranian Student Abroad. And they became initially the head of radio television, but then he had many different roles, but one of them for a short while, he was even a foreign minister. And he fell out with Mr. Khomeini, and he was shot dead. In fact, most of the people who came in the same plane with him, they disappeared. This man's name is Owaisi, and he was an Iranian general. He escaped to Paris. He had a twin brother, again, two assassins. They killed him, and because they were not sure whether it's him or his brother, so they killed his brother too. His name is Abdul Rahman Qasemlu. He is a leader of the Kurdish Democratic Front. And again, he was one of the guys that he thought he can negotiate some form of settlement with the Islamic regime. Unfortunately, they fooled him and his assistant. They, in Vienna, Austria, and in a hotel room, they killed both of them. Another opposition leader by the name of Bruman, he was a financier, he was a very rich man, and he put his money for opposition groups. And again, he was shot. The most famous, perhaps one of the most famous people that I'm tonight kind of pointing out to is this man called Shapur Bakhtiar. He was a French educated man that he even fought for the resistance in the war. And he was the last prime minister of Iran. He escaped again to Paris. First attempt failed. The second time, they killed him and his assistant in his own house. Very tragic death. This gentleman I knew personally myself. He was an Iranian actor and he was based in Kensington, London. When he escaped and he came out, he had a store near the Iranian embassy. And he was, again, very outspoken till he died. They bombed his shop. He wasn't there. His son was there and his son got killed. And the case still open. At the same time, two other man and a son, they were shot dead in their own house in London. The case still open. The second most famous, I think, person tonight, as far as Iranian community is concerned, is this chap. His name is Freydun Farrokhzad, and he was a showman, basically a showman. It reminds me a little bit today, in today's politics, of Zelensky, a man which was a showman, now he's a leader. In fact, he became a leader of opposition and he was very outspoken. He studied in Germany, and when he escaped, he went to US, but then went to Germany. They killed him in his own apartment in Bonn. Remember a few minutes ago, I said the Kurdish leader was assassinated in Vienna. His replacement, which is this chap, Sharaf Kandi on the far end, him and few other Kurdish leaders and few other activists in a restaurant in Germany, it was a Greek restaurant called Mykonos. They machine gunned them and they killed all of them except one. These four people, they all Iranian writers, intellectuals, that during an event which became known as chain killings, they killed a lot of writers and thinkers, and to this date, nobody knows whom, nobody took any responsibility of those killings.